How do you describe your biography?
Well, you know, I always been involved in trying to help the community. My whole career has been in public service types of jobs. 9 years with the Division for Youth. And after that, I went to law school. And then when I got done with that, I was a public defender for 15 years. I saw an opportunity to help my community through being the mayor. I thought I had a good chance of winning that if I got in, and I was lucky enough to serve 2 full terms, which is the term limited amount. And then since then, I've been doing pro bono work for people who find me who I think have issues that maybe some other attorneys weren't fighting hard enough for, or issues that I thought were important to bring up. So I've been doing that, and then I've been watching the criminal justice system pretty much my whole career. Division for Youth was dealing with young people who had an interface with the criminal justice system. So I've seen a lot of it. And look, neither of the candidates in this race have been a prosecutor before now, since Mr. Korchak was beaten a primary. So neither of us has prosecuted crime. I promise the people that I will prosecute crime vigorously when it's committed, especially violent crime. But my whole thing is, what are we doing to prevent it in the first place? And there's nothing that says, even though it's the traditional role of a prosecutor's office to prosecute crime, there's nothing that says you can't have a part of your office that really finds ways to make connections to the communities where they're committing most of the crime comes from. If you're not doing that, you're only doing half your job as far as I'm concerned. And there's a whole movement across this country to take a different look at a system that in 1990 had 200,000 people in jail, now has 2.3 million people in jail across our country, and nobody feels safer. We can't incarcerate ourselves to safety. We just can't do it. I mean, some cases, like I said, violent crimes, once they're committed, obviously you prosecute those very vigorously. In several different categories, violent crime comes up. But I'm going to do everything possible to make sure that crime isn't committed in the first place. Let's take one example. The last shooting that happened out in Endicott. I've been doing a lot of research about violence and violence interruption programs and all those kinds of things. Some of them are so simple as the last one was, these guys were disrespecting each other on social media, and they showed up with guns and started shooting at each other. And that's not the kind of, if we can get a hold of those young people and start a pipeline to success rather than a pipeline to jail or prison, and we can do that. I know we can. I just had a young man who I was at a luncheon the other day, and he, Chamber of Commerce luncheon, and never met him before, I thought. He came up to me and started talking and said, "You're the first person that ever came to Saratoga Terrace when I was a little kid." And all of us kids were thrilled that somebody was paying attention to our community. And I said, "Oh, that's nice." And then I gave my little spiel about crime prevention and the gang prevention we had. And when he got up to talk at that meeting, he said, "I didn't know you were also responsible for gang prevention. I was a kid then, but he said, I wouldn't be in this room being a successful entrepreneur if it wasn't for gang prevention." And so he's actually now endorsing me. And I'm very proud of that. And it shows what you can do to prevent. If we don't tackle the poverty and the things that cause crime in the first place, if we don't have, and there's all sorts of people in this community that are also already working on those issues. I'm going to have a grant writer, just like I did when I was mayor. We're going to create a pot of money, and I hope they'll let us use some of this traffic diversion money to do things that will prevent crime in the first place. We all know King Rice wants to come back to this community and do a youth bureau and a lot of things with young people. Nobody's embraced him enough. I will embrace that kind of initiative. And we can do it all. It's not just the city, it's also out in the countryside. I've been talking to different people when I visit them and talk to them about what they think could be done to prevent crime. And it's a very exciting idea, I think, because isn't that what our goal should be? It's not just to prosecute crime. And there's nothing that says you have to keep the traditional role. I want to have a staff of really good prosecutors that know how to try a case when we need to really put somebody away for a heinous crime. But I also want to have a staff that understands that if we're not doing the things to prevent crime in the first place, we're not making our county, it will never be safer. There's no way that our community's been safer by just incarcerating more people.
How have your experiences, both in the law, but also as a mayor, prepared you to run a large department like this?
Well, that's the thing that I think people should really pay attention to in this race. My opponent, I can't see anything in his resume that suggests that he's going to be able to take a very difficult situation, which he created by running such a negative campaign in the primary. There's been over 10 prosecutors that are left since the primary. My opponent tries to say that it was Mr. Korchak's fault and that all these attorneys were leaving before. That's just not true. And also the whole thing about how many cases were dismissed. Mr. Korchak's right on that. Mr. Battisti is wrong. So you're going to need somebody who's run a big bureaucracy before, who knows how to put teams together, who knows how to hire really competent people, and be a leader and get people to say, hey, let's have a mission statement it's going to make Broome County the safest county we can possibly make it, and I can do that. And he shows absolutely no capacity in his resume to do that. I mean, I think he was running a limousine company which went bankrupt or belly up when he was also doing law. He's was in a 3-person law firm, now he's down to a 1-person law firm. You need to be able to be a person that knows how to work with all sorts of individuals, inspire people, and he talks a lot about this, but I don't think he has the skills. I call him hit and run Paul. I've seen him campaigning, he shows up in an event, makes sure everybody sees him with the sheriff most of the time, shakes hands, and he's gone. You have to talk to people if you're going to change things. You have to get their confidence, especially, this is going to make the police job easier too. If the police embrace and I see that Binghamton Police and others are getting out of their cars and starting to relate to people more in the community, it'll make their jobs easier. When we hire mental health teams to go out and deal with people in our community that are on the streets who have mental health problems, that takes that off the police, takes that off their plate. And we want to do kinds of things like that. Another thing I'm concerned about is the kind of unholy alliance between all the people in the police departments that are endorsing him. He claims he doesn't really have any other endorsements. It's all police, and I suggest that's not really great. In fact, there's a movement across the country that no DA should have any police, shouldn't be allowed, because you have to scrutinize the police conduct every day. And if all your support is coming from police, all the people that are endorsing you, don't you kind of owe them something? I don't want to owe anybody something. This is a system that works only when everybody's doing their job, no special favors for anybody, and doing it ethically and responsibly. And I think I can also, there's a lot of defense attorneys, I'll say right now, that don't do their jobs properly. I think a DA can put pressure on certain segments of the system to make sure everybody's doing their job properly, so we have a fair and just prosecution system.
Outside of your experience, what personal skills do you think you possess that would make you a good DA?
I think it's willing to listen, willing to make connections. You remember we had the neighborhood assemblies. You have to spend a lot of time, and I plan on spending a lot of time, building connections to communities that don't, when they see a police officer, they're afraid, they're not, and not always rightfully so, but that's just the culture. And we have to change that culture. So I can make that gap, I can bridge that gap, I can do things to bridge that gap to make everybody understand that we do need vigorous police enforcement and presence in our communities. If they're, and it will change flip the whole script if if people in the communities know, hey, they're here to protect us too. And really, but that takes some change on how police. Where do the police spend most of their time? In poorer neighborhoods. That's where they spend a lot of their time. And we've got to. If you police a certain neighborhood, you're going to find more crime there. there's all sorts of statistics that I can't get into right now, but one is that if you're doing pretext stops, which are legal now in New York State, you can find a reason to stop somebody because they don't turn on a turn signal or something. If they stop people of color, they're less likely to have be committing a crime than the white people they stop if you do the percentages. However, they stop a lot less white people, dramatically less amount of more white people. But if you compare the pretext stops, you can see that the percentage of white people who are committing crime is higher than the percentage of people of color. So we have to have this discussion. We have to say what are our priorities to make our community safer. 88% of the crime, I'm just looking at the statistics, is retail crime. So a very small amount is all the other stuff, 12%. So let's not scare people, because my opponent says I'm in this to protect my family. Well, his family lives, I think, somewhere out in Kirkwood on top of a hill. Those people aren't likely to be, they're already pretty protected out there. I'm more interested in tackling the real serious things, making relationships with those communities so they trust law enforcement, trust the DA's office, that they're not just going to prosecute them because they can. Look for diversion. Look for a pipeline to success. We've already got the unions who are wanting to do, saying like, look, if you find somebody that wants to be a tradesperson and take this seriously, we'll put them, we need tradespeople. So I know of another story, a guy who just got out of prison, who is now a carpenter's apprentice and living the best life he's ever had. All his life before then was trouble, and now he's finally feeling at peace with himself and what he can accomplish. And we can do that before, I want to do it before people go to prison. I want to do it, like I said, to prevent crime.
Feel free to repeat yourself on this question if you need to, but what do you think are the key issues of this campaign?
The key issues are competence of the person who's going to be in the office. Like I said, whether you like my national politics, I always focus very well on what I'm doing, the task at hand. When we took over the city, it was almost bankrupt. And we left a $9 million surplus after the worst recession in 80 years. And yes, my opponent says, well, you weren't friendly to the police. I wasn't friendly to any of the departments because we had to cut every department by 10%, raise taxes, but look what I left. $9 million, it grew to $20 million, and no mayor since then had to raise taxes. The tax cap was coming. I made the tough choice. The biggest thing I have is that I surround myself with good people. And I'm not the most brilliant person in the world, but I'm tenacious and I fight hard and I do things ethically. And I think that's what I will bring to the DA's office.
So why, you've had a long career, you were mayor once, why do you want to be DA? The movement around prosecutors being the kind of prosecutor I want to be that I've explained today really didn't start that long ago. And, everybody was like, it's always a camp. You've got to be in one camp or the other. And then when I started thinking about it, the DA is has all the decision-making power. And if you have an ethical DA who's really is concerned about the community, then you can do so many good things, I would suggest, to make your community safer and improve the quality of lives, especially of those more marginalized people that usually end up with an interface with the criminal justice system. That's very exciting to me. If it wasn't for studying, I've been studying for the last couple years, this whole movement, I probably wouldn't be running. But this excites me. I think I can really create something that if we do it right, that it will extend over time. Because if people see that we're doing a really good job at preventing crime and prosecuting crime at the same time, it's going to be a model that's hard to not follow.
Probably one of the better known, if not best known, of this sort of new crop of progressive DAs is the DA out of New York, Alvin Bragg, and
Well,
supposedly he's said certain crimes he's not going to prosecute at all. He's carved out certain crimes and said those won't get prosecuted. I haven't vetted that accusation, but it stands to reason to ask you, would you take that sort of approach? Would you go and say, okay, everything underneath this in terms of seriousness, we're just plain not going to prosecute?
No, I wouldn't do that, but I would try to do on lesser crimes. Look, remember when marijuana was still illegal, even the police around here weren't really prosecuting small amounts of pot that vigorously, and that's, so you can do the same thing with, like I said, 88% of the crime is retail theft. I think, quite frankly, I think some of the, like a lot of it comes out of big box stores like Walmart. Let's make them be more part of the solution. Let's have them take more security things so we don't bog our prosecutors down with that kind of stuff. Let's, there's all different ways you can approach that. But my whole thing is, if you really want your community to be safer, and we work with all the, I'm not poo-pooing theft, it's 88% of the crime. But I think there's other ways we can look at how we handle that too. So we're not, that we're really spending our time on the most serious crime and all the kinds of things we can do to prevent it in the first place.
All right, I'm ready for my last question. I always ask the same last question, and again, if this calls upon you to repeat yourself, no problem. But ultimately, why should people vote for you?
Well, I think I have, look, I don't think anybody would suggest, when Lee Zeldin ran for governor, the whole reason, he was fairly successful in how many votes he got, even though it's be really hard to win, but it was all about scaring people about crime. I don't want to scare people about crime. I want to give them solutions. I want to give them hope that we can get ourselves out of a situation that everybody talks about. We're not feeling that safe. Well, it's not going to change unless you change. We all know what Einstein said. If you just continue to do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result, it's not going to happen. And so I want to be the kind of person that says, let's look at, and not every program that every other community is doing is going to fit our community, but one of the things that not being at the head of something is there's a lot of things that have been tried. In Syracuse right now, $1.2 million was just allocated for violence interrupter programs. That's the kind of things I want to do. One of the persons that does a lot of that up there is actually originally from Binghamton, and he wants to come and, when I win, to help here. So I just want to see us do the best possible. That's all I've ever done in my career, is try to push our community forward. Everything I've been involved in is public interest work to try to get our society, get our community to be stronger and better. And that's why I'm running. And I still have a lot of energy. I swim 1.25 miles every day. I eat healthy. It's a little harder to get out of bed in the morning, but I don't think anybody thinks I'm not vital and that I can't handle this. And I plan on doing the best job possible and putting together the best team possible when I'm elected.